So, if you haven't heard of Brett Cooper yet, not only are you lucky, but you probably haven't been paying much attention to online politics for the last couple of months, because with the help of fracking billionaire-backed botting, she's managed to go from 0 to 755,000 in about 6 months, with views like these and like ratios like these, so you tell me if being sycophantic to the bourgeoisie is beneficial or not. Today she's here to blatantly lie about the tax system and to imply that taxation is theft while completely omitting the fact that we're forced by the private sector to starve and go homeless if we don't devote a third of our lives working for some asshole who wants an extra yacht, so much to the point where he'll revoke your healthcare for it. Also, this is the last video I want to do on the tax system for a while because I just want to leave this with the notion that we should tax the rich more. After this, I want to focus on more theory-oriented material. Anyways, here's so much bullshit, not even a Home Depot manure section could stand toe-to-toe with it.
Did you know that today is tax day?
No.
Did you get a refund? And if so, were you happy about it?
No refund.
Did you know that withholding in this country only started 77 years ago? Like our current system of withholding straight from our pay.
Wow. Typically, Daily Wires either double-speak or omit something crucial to get their fracking billionaire donors' points across, but 13 seconds in, and we're hit with something that's just factually wrong. The beginning of withholding taxes dates back to 1862, when money from paychecks were deducted to help fund the Civil War, since half of our economy was going to people who would be spending their days on 4chan in the 21st century. You'd pay to help Americans win against the Confederacy, correct?
I was not aware of that.
So in case you've forgotten, today is one of the worst days of the year. It's tax
You only
day.
think that because the
And if you're anything
Wilkes
like
brothers
me,
have to
you
pay
probably
up.
waited until this past weekend to file your taxes. And now you're waiting on your
That sentiment is even more lucid with the private sector. Wage theft is affecting 26% of non-union workers hurt by forced arbitration. Talk about theft.
little refund. It's interesting because most people think the tax day just comes once a year, but critical thinking and a general understanding of the tax system would show you that you are paying taxes every single month on every paycheck.
And wages are also getting slashed, so are you gonna help me in demanding our money back from the investor class? Oh wait, it is the Daily Wire.
You might just not notice because it gets pulled out of your salary before that direct deposit drops.
Like how employers cut employees' wages to offset the company's losses.
Deposit drops. So question, does that surprise you at all? I'm essentially talking to my fellow Zoomers out there.
Do you think that most people in this country, especially young people, are well informed about how the tax system works or where their money goes?
No, I don't think so. Coming out of high school or college, they have no idea.
That's right, because the investor class doesn't want you knowing that capital gains, which I know is how the Wilkes brothers get taxed most of the time, is 15%, almost half of what income gets taxed at. Not to mention the fact that the rich take so many deductions they typically don't have to get taxed on stuff like stocks. See my ProPublica video.
Do you feel like people in this country, especially young people, know really enough about taxes or where our money goes?
Not enough.
And that's not being condescending in the slightest. It's an important question to ask because the stats about Gen Z and taxes are harrowing, to put it lightly. In a recent H&R Block study, they found that 62% of Gen Z has never even filed their own taxes, and 51% of Gen Z has never been taught about taxes. Investopedia conducted a financial literacy study and found that Gen Z overwhelmingly lacks confidence in any financial knowledge, which is probably because schools are too busy teaching.
Maybe then Zoomers will know how to be billionaires and get stimulus at the same time. Just take enough deductions and credits to where your income is low enough.
Taxes. Investopedia conducted a financial literacy study and found that Gen Z overwhelmingly lacks confidence in any financial knowledge, which is probably because schools are too busy teaching political ideologies rather than tangible life.
This is just wrong on its face and cannot be proven true in reality. Oh wait, for private schools, this is especially true because taxpayers are still forced to fund them even in the 21st century.
Probably because schools are too busy teaching political ideologies rather than tangible life skills.
We do have a flag in the class that you can pledge your allegiance to. And he looks around and he goes, oh, that one?
And while I like to think that I'm
Of course, retards like these legitimately believe that a queer symbol in and of itself is a political ideology. The only reason it's associated with politics is because bigots like you can't stand queer folk living rent-free in your head.
probably a little more knowledgeable about taxes than the rest of my peers, because shout out to my mom for radicalizing me at a young age.
Shout out to your mom for taking every last parsec of my dick last night.
Our current system of tax withholding, which, contrary to popular belief, is a new phenomenon.
Until now, what was your understanding of the history of taxes, how long it's been in existence?
No idea.
Most people, they're born into it and assume it's always been here.
Diving into the history of taxation in this country helps illuminate exactly how we got to where we are. Wars have always been the most important occasions for the introduction of new taxation and laws that many would consider government overreach.
Would you consider it corporate overreach if a third of our lives were spent working?
During and after a war, government needs to increase their revenue to be able to fund the effort.
Don't you guys lobby for war more than anyone else?
That's where income tax and withholding comes in. In the year 1913, the 16th Amendment was passed, which was primarily backed by the Socialist, Populist, and Democratic parties, and it gave Congress the power to tax individual citizens' incomes. For decades following this, individuals who had to pay taxes on their income would pay it the next year in quarterly installments. They had to physically write a check and send it to the government. But around 1940, this all changed as the government geared up for World War II. Federal spending ballooned from $9 billion to $98 billion in less than 5 years. And obviously, taxpayers had to bear the burden. But the current tax system just wasn't effective enough. The government soon realized that trying to collect that much money from the American public wouldn't be possible unless they developed a system to collect the money as the income.
Yeah, we could save pretty much all the money we've spent on this by doing two things. One of them being to just ban defense contractors from lobbying the government at all whatsoever so we don't get into any more stupid wars. Also, while we're at it, you could stop being so sycophantic towards Israel, the biggest government overreach that you're fine with for some reason. The second thing we have to do is tax the rich more, tax the poor much less, and start taxing the clergy on everything the rest of the institutions have to pay.
Was being earned. So began the process of taking money from our income directly from our paychecks for federal spending.
Like how corporations steal our time and starve us if we choose not to work.
Even though the war that started it ended 77 years ago. The US Treasury itself even admitted on its website that wartime withholding not only greatly eased the collection of the tax, but also greatly reduced the taxpayers' awareness of how much tax was being collected.
They should also be aware of how much surplus value is being stolen from them every day.
One of the most important Austrian free market economists once said,
"You mispronounced the word retard."
Pretext on which the safeguards of individual liberty have been eroded. And once they are suspended, it is not difficult for anyone who has assumed these emergency powers to see to it that the emergency will persist."
How ironically prescient that he predicted this, knowing that companies cut their employees' wages due to COVID-19.
This is exactly what happened with our modern pay-as-you-go withholding tax system. It was created to fund World War II, but once the crisis was over, the government opted to not relinquish its power. Shocker. Now, 77 years later, we still have the same system. And at
the same time, there's also a 400,000-fold difference between the richest man in the world and the average household income.
Gotten worse.
Wrong.
Other examples of this include selective service.
So tell your contractor friends to stop lobbying for war,
Patriot Act,
which was passed under the Bush administration, and you said nothing about it then.
Any reactionary gun control, and literally everything that has happened during the last 2 years of COVID-19.
Yeah, like the wage cut for private sector employees.
If the government has the opportunity to expand their reach, they will take it.
Same with the private sector.
It means they get to dip their hands deeper into the pockets of American taxpayers. Now, clearly, I was not around for World War II. My parents weren't even alive then. We are now almost 6 generations away from the crisis. And as each generation enters the workforce, we become more and more accustomed and numb to this system of blind theft.
Based. 1/3 of our lives wasted on labor we know we're gonna feel alienated with every time we wake up and commute. I mean, everyone truly needs to unionize the workplace so they can more efficiently organize strikes in order to demand higher wages and more time off.
Example, in 2019, the Pacific Research Institute did a study and found that 64% of Gen Z would vote for a socialist candidate. So how did we get here? Obviously, there are countless contributing factors, but I can't help but think about the fact that my generation has grown up never thinking twice about the fact that thousands and thousands of dollars are stolen from our paycheck every single month.
Not only this, but substantial amounts of wages are cut, and 1/3 of our lives are ripped mercilessly from our hands. How could these corporate ghouls? If you're gonna call something theft, be consistent about it.
We're conditioned to blindly hand over our money to the government, believing that they have our best interests at heart. Which, newsflash, they don't.
We're blindly conditioned, by you people, to think we should blindly hand over our time to these lunatic bourgeois scumbags, believing they have our best interests at heart, which, newsflash, they don't. The greatest trick capitalism ever played on the working class was getting them to think working was because of their own volition.
It is a terrible mistake to ever look at policies and practices based on what the government intends to do. We have to look at their results. And the results are a hyperinflated, in-debt economy and a society that is mindlessly funding its broken systems.
It's also the strongest economy in the world. Oh, and it's funny you mention broken systems, because I don't think a system in which I starve if I choose not to have a third of my life stolen from me by some rich greedy bastard is exactly in the best condition.
Next time you hear that little ding that says that your direct deposit has arrived in your account, take the extra 5 minutes to go look and see how much the government took before you even saw it.
I'd also look to see what fraction of my paycheck was siphoned away before I even thought.
Might just make you call your senators.
It's too much and I wasn't happy. And I did not get a refund.
Our senators who are exclusively beholden to multi-billion-dollar lobbies. Well, folks, if that wasn't a major showcase of pure deceit and blatant ruling class sycophancy, I don't know what is. Not only did this idiot fail to make a single salient case for why the tax system as it exists shouldn't be here in the first place, but it also actively contributed to the defense of billionaires by cultists and actively ignored the blatant theft that the working class experiences on a daily basis as a result of the private sector's evil. There's a special place in hell for people like this. Anyway, thanks for watching.